Right now, Iran is on a knife's edge. You've got a collapsing economy, you've got furious public protests, and it's all creating this crisis that could fundamentally change the nation. So, we're going to dive into what's happening, why it's happening right now, and what could possibly come next.
To really get what's going on, you have to try and see it from the government's perspective. And this quote from Ali Vez at the International Crisis Group, it really nails it. Iran's leadership doesn't see these as just protests. No, they see them as an existential threat to the Islamic Republic itself. And because of that, they're responding with overwhelming force. And that iron fist, well, it has a devastating human cost. The government has put the country on a near-total internet blackout, which makes getting solid numbers almost impossible. But based on reports from activists and opposition news sites, the estimate is that more than 2,000 people have been killed since these protests kicked off. The sheer scale of this is just staggering. I mean, this isn't some isolated incident in one city. Protests have erupted in every single one of Iran's 31 provinces. And here's the thing that's a huge deal. For the first time since the 1979 revolution, the powerful bazaar merchants have joined in. This group was a pillar of the establishment. They helped bring the current regime to power. For them to be out on the streets protesting, that signals a really deep crack in the system. And of course, none of this is happening in a vacuum. The United States is watching everything very, very closely. The White House is openly talking about a range of options, everything from slapping on new tariffs to the possibility of direct military action. It just adds this really volatile international dimension to what's already an explosive situation at home. So what is fueling all this anger? What's the root cause? Well, you really have to look at the economy. At the very heart of this crisis are these crippling international sanctions that have just pushed millions and millions of Iranians to their breaking point. But, this isn't just about bad economic data on a spreadsheet. Analysts are calling it a deep social and political ordeal. And what that really means is a fundamental, total breakdown of trust between the government and its people. It's this loss of faith that the state can, or even wants to, provide a stable future for them. And that breakdown, it really starts with this vicious economic cycle. So it kicks off with international sanctions that just hammer Iran's key industries, like oil exports and banking. That chokes off their supply of foreign hard currency, like US dollars, which they need for trade. So without that access, Iran's own currency, the rial, just collapses. And the direct result for the average person on the street? Absolutely crippling hyperinflation. Officially, the inflation rate has soared past 50%. But if you talk to Iranians trying to buy food or basic goods, they'll tell you the real day-to-day inflation feels a lot closer to 70%. Just try to imagine your own purchasing power being slashed by that much. It turns just getting by into a daily struggle. And this right here, this gets to a core contradiction that's really fueling the protests. On the one hand, you have ordinary citizens watching their life savings get completely wiped out. But on the other hand, the government is actually expanding its budget for its security forces and the powerful Revolutionary Guards. You can see how that creates this powerful feeling that the state cares more about its own power than the well-being of its people. Now, to really understand this moment, we have to zoom out a little bit, because these protests, they didn't just pop up out of nowhere. They're actually the latest chapter in a 45-year-long history of public dissent in the Islamic Republic. I mean, this history of unrest goes way back. It started just weeks after the 1979 revolution, with women protesting mandatory hijab laws. It continued with massive student protests in '99, the huge Green Movement in 2009 after a disputed election, and then the absolutely brutal Bloody November crackdown in 2019 over a fuel price hike. Each of these moments leading up to the Women Life Freedom movement in 2022 has kind of built on the last, and it's all set the stage for the crisis we're seeing today. And when you look back over those 45 years, you start to see this predictable and frankly tragic playbook emerge. Protests get sparked by economic pain or calls for more freedom, and the government's response is almost always the same: violent crackdowns, blaming it all on foreign enemies, and shutting down the internet to control the narrative and hide what's really happening. So all of this brings us to the crucial question, right? Where does Iran go from here? With this long history of dissent and a government that seems locked in this cycle of suppression, analysts are looking at 4 potential paths forward. And the ultimate question is really this: are we watching the prelude to regime change, or is it something else?
While you hear protesters on the street demanding the complete overthrow of the government, a lot of experts believe a transformation from within the existing power structure, as difficult as that would be, is probably a more likely outcome. Let's just quickly break down these four scenarios. First, there's renewed diplomacy, basically striking a bargain with the US to get those crippling sanctions eased. Second is genuine internal reform, actually fixing the broken parts of the economy. That's the most sustainable path, but also the hardest. Third is just more of the same, continued suppression, using force to crush protests and just buy time. And then there's the fourth, the one everyone's afraid of, state collapse, which could risk a civil war and destabilize the entire region. You know, this quote really just distills the whole crisis down to one single question. It's suggesting that all the economic numbers, the inflation rates, they're just symptoms. The real issue is, who is the Iranian economy actually for? Is it there to serve the people, or is it just a tool to keep the state in power? And that leaves us with one last critical question. For 45 years, the regime has successfully crushed dissent. But now, with public anger deeper than it's ever been, and with the economy in an absolute freefall, that old strategy of just buying time with force, it looks more fragile than ever. So the question isn't really if another confrontation is coming,